Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Sharon Oyella, and today I'm going to show you the harder parts of making this Yeti. This is not a stitch-by-stitch tutorial. You can find the free pattern on my blog. That link should be popping up here on your screen. This video is going to show you how to do the horns, the face, the arms, and the little feet. This guy is the one I designed specifically for the cave mountain. This is a free pattern on my blog as well. It holds 2 of these inside. So you can make these guys as Christmas tree ornaments, stocking stuffers, make them for your loved ones, or use them for craft sales. The supplies list is in the written pattern, but I'll just give you a quick rundown. Each one of these is made with 2 different colored yarns. I'm using Red Heart Comfort yarn, but you don't have to use the same brand. It's an acrylic yarn. If you're in the UK, the closest to that weight is Aran. With that yarn, for some of them I used a 4mm, and if I wanted to make them a little bit smaller, I used a 3.75mm. To make the yarn fuzzy, I'm using a steel pet brush, and you can find these in your local dollar stores. So the rest of the supplies is in the written pattern. Like I said, once you get there, scroll down the page very slowly because all the information is there on how to print the pattern out for free, and I'll also link you to the mountain and all that good stuff. In the next clip, we're going to start with the horns, and in that is a magic ring tutorial. So you can go grab that written pattern, come on back, and we'll get started. Alright guys, we're going to start by making the horns first because we do sew these on before we finish crocheting the body, which is a lot easier to do it that way. And I'll begin with the round horns. And then after that we'll make the pointy horns, and depending on which one you're interested in, you can look in the timestamps and skip over this part if you don't want to do the round ones. And I have 2 yarn tails here. That's because the starting yarn tail is created when I did my magic ring, and I did a magic ring with a double loop. So there's 2 ways of doing this magic ring, and even though this isn't a stitch-by-stitch tutorial, I'm still going to walk you through these 2 rows of the horns, because I know that some people struggle with working in smaller rounds. So I'm going to show you my favorite way of getting this magic ring. It's working over a double loop. You can watch what I'm doing. If you don't like it this way, you can always try the alternate method, and that link should be popping up here on your screen, and that will show you another way of getting this ring. So I'm going to take this shorter yarn tail, I'm going to wrap it around these 2 fingers twice, and then hold the shorter yarn tail between my pinky and my thumb, and then hold the working yarn between my pinky and my thumb. Now I'm creating a slip knot, so I'm going to go through. I'm going to grab this yarn back here and pull it underneath those 2 loops on my finger. Now I'm going to grab that yarn again and pull it through the loop on my hook. And there's my slip knot. So now I can crochet on. I'm going to be putting 6 single crochets into this ring. I'm going to go through the center of the ring every time I go through. Grab the yarn and pull it through. I have 2 loops, yarn over and pull through those 2 loops. And there was my first single crochet. I'm going to repeat that 5 more times. That's my 3rd one. That's my 4th, 5th, and last one, number 6. I've created 6 single crochets in that ring, and you can see them right there. They look like V's. There should be 6 of those V's going down. Now I'm going to close up the ring, but first I'm going to pull this starting yarn tail out from in between those 2 loops. I'm going to hold the slip knot between my finger and my thumb, and now I'm going to pull up from my finger and my thumb. It's not that one, so I know it's the next one. Pull up until that ring is closed. And now to get rid of this ring, we're going to pull on the starting yarn tail. And that's my favorite way of getting a magic ring, and some people do struggle with that, so don't give yourself a hard time if you do. You can always try the alternate way. Again, that link is up here in the iCard. Now we'll carry on to row 2, and this is the starting yarn tail I was talking about. That's the one that's hanging here, and I'm just going to leave it hanging. I'm going to work around it. So I'm going to put 1 single crochet in each one of those 6 stitches. And this is the row that might be difficult for you, so just give yourself lots of time and take breaks when you need them. I'm going to go underneath those 2 loops of the first stitch, pull my yarn through, and relax. Don't hold everything so tight. That was my first one. Now I'm going to go into the second stitch. And the piece starts folding up on itself. That's normal. Let it happen. And there's my second one. I'm going to go into my 3rd stitch now. Single crochet, and into my 4th, single crochet, into the 5th one now, single crochet, and then the last stitch of the row right here, and if it's getting difficult to see, just pull it back until you can see that stitch, and one single crochet, and row 2 is finished. Now we're going to have to flip this piece because you can see it's folding up on itself. So we're just going to pull out our last stitch so we don't lose it, and then push where that starting yarn tail is coming out of, inward. Use your crochet hook if you have to, and turn it right side. And then get ready to crochet on. Now row 3, we just use up 2 stitches of this row, and the only reason I do that is just to kind of even out this area here. Because if you look at it right now, it's not very even back here. So I'm going to put a single crochet in the first stitch of row 3. And now I'm going to slip stitch the next stitch. So the next one I'm going to go through, pull the yarn through, instead of yarning over, just pull that first loop through the second loop. And we're done. Finish off, leave a little bit of a tail for sewing. And there's our little horn. Now you can leave this yarn tail where it is, this finishing yarn tail. What I like to do is bring it down the center. Just makes it a little bit easier when I'm sewing it to the top of the head. So there's my starting yarn tails coming out of the center already. I'm going to carry this up through the center of the horn and pull. Pull gently. You don't want to pull the side of the horn up. You just want to pull that yarn tail out of there. And now I'm going to go back down and into the horn and then out through the center. And again, pull gentle. And I have a little bit of a tail for sewing, so I think that length is good right there. So for those of you who wanted to make the pointy horns, I found the easiest way to do this was work in rows instead of rounds. So let's do that together. I'm going to make a slip knot and chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now starting in the second chain from the hook, we're going to put a single crochet down the chain. So starting in this one, when I go through I like to have 2 loops of the chain on top of my hook, and then 1 loop of that chain on the bottom. Pull the yarn through, and single crochet. Go into the next chain, and single crochet, and now into the next chain, and then the last chain of the row, single crochet, and row 2 is done. Now chain 1 and turn. Skipping that chain we just made, we're going to put 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitch holes and then slip stitch the last one. 1 single crochet in the first, 1 in the second, 1 in the third, and now slip stitch that last one. When you go through, make sure you have 2 loops of that stitch on top of your hook. Pull the yarn through and then through. Chain 1 and turn. And now skipping that chain, we're going to put a single crochet in the next 4 stitches. One, 2, 3, and 4. And now we're done. We're going to leave a tail for sewing. Pull the yarn tail through that loop and pull it tight. Now we're going to fold this in half and we're going to whip stitch the outer loops together to make a little horn. What I like to do is take the starting yarn tail and just hold it in the center and then fold the horn around it. And we're going to whip stitch these outer loops together. You can see the outer loops of the stitches. Just whip stitch those together. Cut off the starting yarn tail. We're going to knot this one off here, the working yarn here. Make a loop, and before pulling it all the way, just go through that loop and then pull tight. And now carry this yarn tail down to the bottom of the horn. And there we go. And you leave that yarn tail for sewing. So now we're going to do the Yeti face, and we're at the end of row 10. Make sure to pull out your last stitch into a big loop so you don't lose it. And that should be in the center in the back, and we're going to work on the front like this. So your last stitch that you put in should be in the center and in the back. And I'm going to be using safety eyes, and I get these from Amazon. They are 6, 8, 9, 10, and 12 millimeter. I'm going to use the 9 millimeter for mine. And they have these little plastic backs here. I'm going to show you how to install those in a second. So the first safety eye is going to go in between the 6th and 7th row. I'm going to count from up here. I'm just going to count those rings starting with row 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So in between there. And then my next one goes over 4 stitch holes because I want 3 visible stitch holes in between them. So 1, 2, 3. So the next one goes right here. And now I can put the backs on. These backs don't have any instructions, but what I figured out is there's a big hole there, or the wide end, and then the narrow end. I put the narrow end towards the inside of the head, and then I'm going to push. Now that the eyes are installed, the safety eyes, we can go ahead and brush the body. If you're doing yarn for eyes, then you want to brush the body first, of course. So I'm going to take my steel pet brush, and I'll start on this side first. What I do is just kind of flatten it out and just lightly brush over. You don't want to brush in the same spot too long because it can create some little pulls in your yarn. Like you can pull strands of yarn out, so you just want to keep the brush moving. You don't want to make any holes in your body. I'm just moving all over. And now I will straighten it out and then flatten it for this side here. And I'm holding my yarn tails out of the way. I don't want to brush those. Now we can add a nose and a mouth. And for the nose I'm going to use the alternate color, so the same color I'm using for the horns. And I'm going to wrap the yarn over the 7th row. So I place these eyes in between the 6th and 7th, so I know this is the 7th row right here. And if you're adding eyes, then this is the same thing, the same method that you'd use. You pull the yarn through from the back, pull one yarn tail through and leave the other one hanging inside there. And I'm just going to wrap over that 7th row, and I'll wrap a number of times. That's once, 2, 3, and probably 4 will do it, and 4. And I think that's enough for a nose, so I'm just going to bring it down one more time. And I can use the same color for the mouth as well, if I wanted to, or I could use an alternate color like black or brown or red even. But I think I'll just use the same color. So I'll just bring the same yarn tail just underneath the nose there, and you can play around with this. You don't have to do exactly what I'm doing. So that's a 1 row underneath. Wrap over a stitch hole and bring it down. And that part's done. Now I just have to knot these 2 off. And I'm not going to pull too tight because I'll pull that mouth in if I do. Just pull it snug up there. I double knotted. Now I can cut these yarn tails up short. And that part is done. So now we can go on to sew in our horns. So I'll show you how to do the round horn, and then I'll show you how to do the pointy horn. So for the round horn, because I pulled both of these through the center, I'm going to thread these both. And I'm going to be going over, there's row 1, you can see that little ring there, row 1, row 2, so just on the other side of row 2 and towards the front a little bit. So there's row 1, there's row 2, and just over that. And I'll bring it down. And I think right there is perfect. And if it wasn't perfect, I could adjust it. I could just kind of move it around, see? And just hold it in place while I sew it in place. So what I can do now is just take one of these yarn tails off my hook, or my yarn needle. Now I'll just bring this yarn tail back up through. And pull. And then bring my yarn needle back just underneath the edge of the horn and back down. Now I'll do the back of the horn. Bring my yarn needle up underneath the horn and out through a stitch on the edge and pull, and then back down and pull. Okay, I'm going to go back up. I'm going to do a stitch here on this side and a stitch on this side. So now we have to knot these two off. I always double knot and then cut up shorter. Popping in with an update. After I finished filming the tutorial for this guy, I ended up taking those off and sewing them a little bit further apart, and this guy looks super cute with them closer together, and this one didn't so much. So just be happy with where yours are placed before you go ahead and sew those on. Now in the next clip we're going to be sewing on the pointy horns, and those ones go in between the 3rd and 4th row. So let's get sewing those in. And again, I'll just bring in the yarn tail down in between the 3rd and 4th, 1, 2, 3, and 4, in between there, and pull down. And then go back up. Make sure you're going over a stitch hole so you don't come out through the same stitch hole. It would just pull through that way. And I'll bring it underneath the horn and through. And then down and through. And pull. And now you just want to adjust it so it's sitting properly, and it would be sitting like that. So now I would put one more stitch, and again, don't go through the same stitch hole you came through. I don't have to come underneath the horn. I can always come on the outside of the horn and then grab a stitch hole and then down into the head. And that would be done. And because we only have one yarn tail, what we can do is leave it hanging until we sew the other horn in and then knot them together, or you can just wrap around a bit of yarn in here and then bring it through that loop. Nope, it just pulled through. Bring it through that loop again and then pull. And then you can cut it up shorter. Alright my friends, I'm going to finish sewing in this second horn, and you can refer now back to the written pattern and finish up to row 13, at the end of row 13, and then come back here and I'll show you how to stuff the body and finish up all the other little bits, and we're going to do the toes together and all that great stuff. So you can pause the video now and then come on back at the end of row 13. So I've made it to the end of row 13, and I'm going to brush out the rest of the body, and I'm going to hold that yarn tail out of the way so I don't brush that as well. And again, I'm just going to flatten the body out and then just go over the bottom part. Now we're going to stuff the body. So once the body is stuffed, now we're going to create that little separation here. And I want to make sure that my yarn needle is going right in the center. So I'm just going to bring this back a little bit, right through here, and then out through the front. And as long as it's centered between the eyes, then I can pull it through. And pull tight, and you can hold that together with your fingers. Now bring the yarn needle up over a row, and then back out through the back end of the body, or the back side of the body, and pull tight. And I'm going to do that again. So I'll bring the yarn needle down and out through the center again, and pull. And then up and through the back end, and pull. Okay, and it should hold on its own. If it starts to let go, then you can just knot it off here. We want to stuff a little bit more in here before we close up these leg holes. So just leave this yarn tail for a minute. Now we're going to use our pencil, the back end of our pencil, and we're going to get the stuffing pushed in there with our pencil. Okay, and I'll do the other side. Now I'm going to close up these legs. I'm going to bring my yarn needle inside one of the holes and just bring it through. And now I'm going to whip stitch these back loops. That's the loops on the inside, not the outside. Whip stitch them together. And it only takes 2 or 3 on each hole to close it up. And this one, I'll just knot it off, and that one is done. And now I'll bring this down and into the body and out through that hole. And now I'll do this side. And I'll knot that off, and that part is done. Okay, so what I noticed when I was making my first couple of little Yetis, it wouldn't stand up on its own, but you can see this one is standing up just fine. And the reason why that is because I created the back of the foot here just by wrapping my yarn. And it makes it flat and makes it stick out a little bit more there. And it gives the Yeti something to stand up on. Okay, so here's the front of the face. I'm going to be working on the back. So I'll bring this yarn tail to the back of the foot, or the little closed up hole. And now I'm going to wrap this yarn around and around one spot, maybe 4 or 5 times, right on this outer edge here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now I'll go right next to it and do the same thing here. 1, 2, so you can see it's already starting to create a ridge, and that's what I want. 2, 3, and 4, and then I'll do one more right beside it. And I'll knot this one off when I'm done, and there we go. So that created a little bit of a wider area here, and that will give the Yeti something to stand up on it. So now I'm just going to bring this over to this side. And now I'll do this side, or this other foot, and wrap 4 times in each spot. And the back of the foot is done. So now I can just bring this out anywhere. And I'm going to knot it off right here. And then carry it through and away. And cut free. Now it needs the toes to stand up. So we've got to put the little toes on there, and then he should stand up on his own. So now we'll create the little toes, and we're going to take a strand of green yarn. I'm going to go right through the horn, and I'll bring it down right here. It doesn't matter where you start, front or back. It doesn't really matter. I'll just bring that through, and I'll leave the other one hanging. And now you can see, if I turn it this way, So I'm going to wrap around that loop. That's 1. 2. 3. And now go over to this next loop and do the same thing. Wrap 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. And then over to the loop right beside it. Wrap 3 times. And that's all we do for the toes. Now I'll just bring this down into the body a little bit and then out through the other side, and I'll make the toes on this side. And I'm just going to knot it off here. And then I'll carry it through and out anywhere. Pulling it slightly in cut, and now I can cut this one free up here as well. After a little wonky looking, you can straighten them out. Alright, now we're going to do the arms, and there are 2 different ways that you can do the arms. Now the most familiar method in most small amigurumi is making a small tube, and then a couple years ago I started adding this part as a hand to these small tubes, and it's just crocheting through both sides, and that is in the written pattern. And then there's the alternate way where you can make a flat a flat piece, and then add in the alternate color at the end, which I think is my favorite, even though it's an odd way to do it. So I've changed my mind. I'm going to show you how to add the colored part to the end of that tube. I don't want to have to link it because some of my videos are actually going to disappear pretty quick here due to that COPPA thing. I'm going to have to take some of them down, so I'm not sure which ones I can leave up. So I'm going to be showing you here on film right now how to add the colored part at the end of the tube. So let's do it. We're going to work in the open end. First of all, we're going to take that finishing yarn tail and we are going to bring it to the top of the arm and just knot it off up here without pulling on the yarn tail, because if you pull on it, it will pull this bottom of the arm up. So pull gently on that yarn tail, go through that loop, and then pull tight, and that's knotted off. You'll use this one to sew it to the body when you're ready to. So this open edge, we're going to push our hook right through both sides of the bottom stitches. Both sides. Okay, and we're going to pull the colored yarn through, lay it over our hook and pull it through, and then get ready to crochet on. Hold on to this yarn tail in the back so it doesn't pull all the way through. Chain 1. Then in that same hole that you were just in, go back in there. And now we're going to do a single crochet. So pull the yarn through and single crochet. Now we're going to crochet over top of this yarn tail here. So go through the next stitch hole and hold this yarn tail over your hook. Now pull the yarn through. We're going to put 2 single crochets in this space. 1, 2. And then in the next space, we're going to put 2 single crochets. Again, hold the yarn tail over your hook. This way we don't have to weave it in when we're done. And 2 single crochets. Now we're done. You can cut free from this starting yarn tail, the one you crocheted over. And this yarn tail, you can just weave it in. Depending, again, you can do left and right. You can, depending on which way you sew this down. Let's sew it this way. So it would go on the arm like this, or on the body like this. Okay, we just have to knot this off now. Pull tight, and then pull the yarn tail through all of those stitches and out, and now you can cut free. And that's it. If you wanted to make the more common tube arm, then that's how you would add the green at the bottom. And I think that's a great arm. I think it would actually look really good on these guys. I don't know why I just preferred these flat arms for this pattern here, but again, the tube arm would just look so cute on there. And you can fluff it up. Make sure not to do any of the green parts there. And it's ready to get sewn onto the body. Alright, so to make these flat arms, we're going to first chain 4, so make a slip knot, and chain 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then starting in the second chain from the hook, we're going to put a single crochet in the next 3 chains. There's 1, 2, and last one in the row is 3. Now chain 1 and turn, skipping that chain, put a single crochet in each one of those stitches. So we'll be doing 3 of them. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1 and turn, skipping that chain we just made, a single crochet in each of those 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3, and we're done. We're going to finish off, leave a little bit of a tail for sewing. This is what I use for the top of the arm. I'll be sewing these into the body, and then the bottom part here is where I add the alternate color. So we're going to insert our hook into the corner, the opposite side of these yarn tails. Pull the green through, or whatever color you're using. Get ready to crochet on. Hold on to this yarn tail in the back with your finger so it doesn't pull through. And chain 1. And then into that same space we're going to put a single crochet. And then 2 single crochets into the next space over. And you can let go of that yarn tail back here, and actually we're going to hold it up along the edge and we're going to crochet around it now. So we put 1 single crochet in that space already, so we're going to go back in there. See, we're crocheting around that yarn tail. And that was our second one. And now for the last one, 2 single crochets into that last space, and we're crocheting around that yarn tail. 1 and 2, and we're done. So we're just going to finish off. You can cut this yarn tail that you crocheted over, you can cut that free. This other one we're going to have to weave it in, and what I do, instead of just weaving it in, I'm going to have a left and a right. So this is my left side. It would be his left, but we're looking at on our right side here. So see how I shape that? So I'm going to do this side. So when I shaped that, I brought my yarn needle through this side, but because I want to do the opposite now, I'm going to go on this side and pull it down this way. Hopefully this makes sense, guys. Sorry, it sounds a little bit confusing. And I'm going to do it again and kind of just pull it forward. Okay, I'm going to knot off right here. And there we go. Now I'll just push my yarn needle right through the center of those green stitches and pull it through, and now I can cut free. Now I'm going to shape this a little bit further. I'm going to take the longer yarn tail and I'm going to weave it down here. So when I place this on the doll, I'm going to have it sewn on this way. So I'm just going to squeeze this together and put a stitch through both sides. And I'm going to go back through both sides. And I know it looks really funny and it's probably not making any sense to you, but it makes a little bit of a difference to have a little bit of a wrist there. Now I'm just going to knot off here. And now I'll just weave this back up to the top, and I'll use it to sew the arm in place. You don't want to brush any of the colored or the alternate color, so I'm just going to fold the color down and carefully brush it out without hitting any of that colored part. And I'm only doing the one side. You know, I just realized I used a different color yarn for these arms. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm going to have to remake those with the color yarn I was supposed to. You see the difference in color there? Alright, look at him. He's got the right colored arms now, and I'm going to go ahead and sew this on. So I've already got my yarn tail threaded there, and I'm just going to place it onto the body, and right about there. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The top corner is on the 7th row, just about on or about the 7th row, and then the other corner comes down a bit lower. So I'm just going to bring my first stitch in, and I'll come out anywhere through a stitch hole, doesn't matter where, and pull it. Go back in the same stitch hole I was just in, and now this time I'm going to come up underneath the arm. And then into the body and out the back. Okay, that yarn tail is done. I'm going to grab the other one and add a couple stitches here. And go into the body and then out through a stitch hole anywhere. And that's pretty much sewn in just like that. So I can go back in the stitch hole I just came out of, come up through the arm, and then down into the body, and I'll come out anywhere else through the back. And that's it, guys. It is sewn in place. So I can fluff it up a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to knot these off in the back. And then carry them through and away and cut them free. Alright my friends, that brings us to the end of this video tutorial. If you're interested in making the mountain that I designed for these guys, then you can hit that link that's popping up on your screen, and that will bring you to the tutorial for the mountain. And in that video I will have the link to the mountain pattern itself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you super soon.